You're tuned to Risky Business. I'm in the studio with Jono Shaw, my co-host and sound producer. Hello, Jono.
Hello, Brian. Yeah, I'm doing good, and you? I'm busy finding your music, so if I'm a little quiet, you know why.
That's quite okay, because I know my guest is going to be more than suitably...
Who's our guest today?
Loquacious. Patrick, welcome to the show. Patrick Kayton.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
CEO and founder of Cognician, currently based out of the UK with, I think, head office on the west coast of America in San Diego, and its origins here in South Africa. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Nice to be here again.
Wonderful. Yes, you're not a stranger to this show at all.
No, I do love it, actually, and thank you for having me back.
Absolutely, and I think such a great story to tell. And why don't we jump right into it? And I think give the listeners the full history. I think that's befitting of the day. Tell them the origins of Cognician and where you've come from.
You know, Brian, nowadays, for all new joiners into the company, I run a session that is 90 minutes long, and it's about the history of Cognition and the culture and that sort of thing. It's becoming harder and harder to condense that into 90 minutes, so I don't know how I'm going to do it now. But so Cognition, founded by my brother Barry and I, we have a background in instructional design, and we built this business out of another one that we had going back to late 1999. In both businesses, we've done the same thing, which is to create programs that change mindsets and behaviors of very large groups of people. So in our previous business, we did that without technology. We worked on large-scale entrepreneurial development and HIV infection reduction programs in Southern Africa. And it came time to scale up what we were doing, but we couldn't find the tech to do it. Everything that was on the market was really good at spreading around information. And we knew that information had something to do with changing people's mindset and changing their behavior, but very little. You know, if as we often say, if information changed people's behavior, then no one would drive fast on the highway or smoke or drink or anything that any of those fun things. But we do it anyway. And so what we need to change behavior is something very different. And Barry and I recognized that, and we started building new technology to be able to take advantage of the things we had learned in that business. And that's what ultimately became Cognition. So we had a few important milestones in our history. One of them was realizing that we didn't have to have all the intellectual property in the world to change people's behavior. We had a great system for it. And so we started working with other companies like Cycan, like Competitive Capabilities International, that had great intellectual property for continuous improvement in manufacturing. We met Accenture and started working with them in 2016. And obviously they have great intellectual property and processes when it comes to managing change. So we help to enact change at Accenture's clients. And what all of these partnerships did was enable us to be anywhere and operate anywhere. So we became instantly a global company that was able to influence behavior in Japan and Australia and the United States and China all at once, right? You can build once, be in one place and deploy anywhere. And so we've been very fortunate over the last 10 years in particular to work with some of the world's great companies, truly great companies. And we've learned from them along the way. And we take those learnings and we recycle them and make them available to all our new clients as well.
And of late, of course, is the onslaught and advent and tsunami of AI and
all those things,
all the things that come with it, the excitement, the fear, the trembling, the opportunity, the potential for some people of a changed place of work and space of work, which doesn't necessarily have to result in an exit of work. It all depends, of course, on the situation and what it looks like. But one of the things that we've seen, of course, is that in spite of all the stuff on social media and the noise around AI, many organizations and the people within them are pretty rudimentary in terms of its uptake and its usage. And I think that's birthed a whole opportunity for Cognition.
It totally has, and there's a reason for this. Before getting into AI per se, the reason it's been a great opportunity for us is that we've always been about changing the way people work, right? Getting them to do things more productively, getting them to do things that are meaningful to them in new ways. And this is no different. It's obviously a sweeping change. It's a huge change. We often liken it to desktop computing in the 1980s, the internet in the 1990s, and that's probably it, right? I don't even think mobile technology makes as much of a dent in the way that we work pervasively in big corporate companies as those other two things, right? The mobile technology doesn't quite make it doesn't quite fit in that little trio. And so while we've been helping people get to grips with new ways of working in all sorts of environments over the last 16 or so years in Cognition, those skills, those attitudes, those features that we've built into our platform, they're all completely relevant right now. So this is for us, is a great intersection of a change in the way people work and everything we know that's required to make that happen. And the technology that we've built over the last 16 years to do that really efficiently and at scale.
Yeah, I think that you touched on such an interesting point, and it's something a lovely expression I'd actually forgotten, and I'm going to resurrect it. That point of information doesn't change behaviors, and as doesn't intellectual acknowledgement of a truth. You can acknowledge that that's a true thing and that it's actually a good thing. You can acknowledge that the 7 habits of Covey are excellent, but it doesn't mean that you're going to imply any one of them.
Not at all.
I was talking about this just the other day, and I might have even shared it on radio, so I'm going to do it again because spaced repetition is a good way of learning.
Yeah, totally.
But there was a book written around about 2000, which was a very heavy period for mergers and acquisitions, and lots of just pre-stock market crash and the dot-com crash and all those good things. And the book was called 5 Frogs on a Log. And there was an anecdotal little question at the beginning of it that said, 5 frogs are sitting on a log. One decides to jump off. How many are left? And people would say 4 or none, or. And the answer is, of course, 5. And the reason for that is deciding to do something and doing it are two very different things. So what is it that takes people from that space of firstly acknowledgement of the truth and recognizing its relevance or importance, and then implementing into their lives, because they've got to make those difficult steps of confronting their fears and overcoming their self-limiting beliefs and working through sort of uncomfortable stuff to pursue it. But it's only when they see it in the context of real meaning and purpose for them, that they're willing to actually undergo that. And then amazingly enough, look back and say, well, what was that all about? What have I been, walking away from or shying away from all my life that in fact is this is a good thing. I'm going to keep this up, Change is great.
Totally, but relatively few people in the broader population feel that change is great and they're drawn to it and they're all over it. Most people are conservative by nature and want to preserve the status quo. And there's a very good reason for that, right? Evolutionarily, if you go and put your neck out and try and change everything that you're doing, there's a very realistic possibility that you're going to run into big, scary beasts and they're going to take you out. If you're safe right now, why would you change the status quo? But that attitude doesn't build bridges and send rockets into space, right? Or do anything else that's really advances the human race in meaningful ways. And so we have to find legitimate ways, and you've already mentioned the key magic word, right? Magic words, meaning and purpose. Those are the ways that we think are that you get a realistic chance of getting people to change when they're internally motivated to change. The question is, how do you get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to all buy into some sort of internally motivated change?
Yeah, that's exactly. Simultaneously, I mean, that's a really difficult thing to do. And so I suppose it's around clever systems and things like the platform that Cognition's developed. I mean, it's a way of getting things to scale quickly.
Exactly that, right? So very often when I'm called into a client for the first time. They said, we want to see the platform, show me the platform. And they said, before I show you any technology, I want to share some thoughts with you. The platform wasn't built. I actually had a client recently say to me, he was a very curious guy, and he said, I love learning management systems and learning technology in general. Which ones influenced you? I said, none, not a single one. We didn't copy a single thing that existed before. What we had is long cherished beliefs about what caused people to change, what caused them to act in different ways. And you take advantage of those things, those ideas, and we've built them into the technology. So the technology exists because it takes advantage of these powerful ideas about how people change.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And the uptake of this new way of changing behaviors, introducing new habits, how was that originally and initially received when you went to market? Because in fact, if you think about it, Cognition wasn't actually serving an existing market, it was creating a new one.
No. Yeah. And it's one of the hardest things to do, right? Is to create a new product in a new market and creating a new position. And to be honest, we haven't fully done it successfully, right? We as I said, we work with great companies and we've got some pretty significant scale, but we're not a household name, right? And I don't think we'll ever be, right? But we're known amongst the people that work with us, and we still have a job to do to be able to carve out a position in people's minds that says there's a powerful piece of software that you can use to enact change at scale, what we call activation, to activate large groups of people. And that remains so because, I'm reminded of working with one of our clients at Old Mutual many years ago. And at the time, he was saying some interesting things about HIPAA. I've been out of the South African space for quite a while, so I'm not sure what is HIPAA still a thing? In the UK, it's compare the market with the meerkats. Everybody loves the little meerkats, right? And I remember my client saying to me, "Do you realize that HIPAA is probably spending about 50 million rand a year on advertising alone in order to help them carve out this position?" And that's a 2010 figure, so add a multiple now. But it was astonishing to me that in addition to actually creating the market position or crafting the idea, that disseminating it through advertising alone, let alone whatever else they were doing, was going to cost them about 50 bar a year. And we're in a similar kind of situation. The best way for the way that we take advantage of marketing, or at least our best route to market, is by people who know us. Because once you've worked with us, and they start telling other people. But it's not that. Yeah, Bush Telegraph is not exactly the same as wildfire, right? We need different ways of being able to get out to become known.
Yeah, I think, and just listening to you speak, what comes to mind also is that in the situation of where you've got a suggested new way of doing things and it can benefit people, as much as that can be enticing and compelling, it's actually ironically less motivating than a real pain point.
Yeah.
Go back to the whole thing of our that our brains are wired twice as much to be twice as receptive to avoiding a risk than it is moving towards an attractive goal or opportunity. And so it's almost like we've got to wait till it's, if we don't do this, we're actually not going to survive, or if we're not going to do this, the business will fail, or something along those lines, where people, and by the way, you won't have a job, and all of a sudden you can get people's attention a whole lot better that way. And I think it's very sad,
Yeah, it is, and it kind of flies in the face of what we believe in, which is intrinsic motivation. Because obviously there's massive intrinsic motivation when there's an existential crisis on the line, right? Are you going to be around tomorrow? We prefer obviously taking a glass half full approach to that. The story I often tell is one of my favorite movies, Monsters, Inc. You seen Monsters, Inc.? Right. So you remember that what happens is that the monsters go and scare kids, and the screams fill up the batteries until one day a monster accidentally makes a kid laugh, and then the battery explodes that it's so powerful. Now, if you can actually create a movement within organizations that's positive and life-affirming and forward-looking and seeks out to prosper, then that's the best thing that you can do. It's just much harder than creating fear and doubt and uncertainty, which is, and they're out there in abundance anyway. And I think that's the unfortunate thing about the way in which AI has been introduced into most businesses. It's a fear-based thing. If we don't do this quickly, we're not going to catch up, right? And that does cause people to think, well, am I going to be still an employee? Am I still going to have a job? Is AI going to take my job away? That's not a circumstance under which somebody is going to feel really motivated to pick up the tool and figure out what to do with it, right? They're going to resist it.
Yeah, and I think that as I'm sitting here reflecting, that when the learning and the shift comes through a away from pain point perspective, I don't know if it's as sustainable as when the person has the aha, wow, this is amazing. How could I not have lived like this before? How could I have lived like this, not lived like this before? And all the good things that come with that revelation, that excitement, the shifting into a new space, I think is far more entrenching than, oh, I've done this so I can get through this and I can get past the issue. Because once the issue's gone away, then amazingly enough, people often go back to what was there before.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the approach that we've taken throughout. It's the same kind of approach that we would take to anything, is to figure out what is meaningful to you right now, right? What are your personal pain points? What is your ambition at work right now? Once you understand somebody and where they're at, you can make a reasonable recommendation about what to do next and whether the AI is going to help or not. And in the moment at which somebody starts to articulate what's difficult, or if only we could, right? Like that's a lovely mindset to be in. If only we could do this, right? I feel motivated to figure out how we can get some really interesting thing or really powerful thing done. That energy, that willingness to make a contribution is like the kids laughing in Monsters Inc. It's way, way more powerful than wow, if I don't pick this up, I'm going to be out of a job.
So, Patrick, I want to go back to your Hippo example. And yes, they're very much around. I see their billboards when I drive to work.
I use them a lot when I still live there.
Yeah, the main emphasis I see is that they often, it centers around what can you save? In other words, we're going to put money back in your pocket or something like that. And, I've always sort of thought about, would I use that? Because I don't. I mean, I'm going to be honest and say I don't sort of feel drawn to going to that. I've got a broker and they give me different solutions, and I feel like what I pay for is what I get in some ways.
Right.
And so why would I go and save? And for me, it was more about like the contrast between that, because I also think about those things when I see those billboards.
Yeah.
And the tool has kind of got to be relevant and serve its purpose. And then the other point I wanted to sort of think about there was when I first got an iPad, and I got one of these giant iPads, and how I took to that was like, wow, how did I ever live without this? But when I started trying AI, it was not as though I was like, I always enjoyed the computer on Star Trek. I thought that was cool, but this doesn't quite sit with me. So in my opinion, it's still got a few years to go to get to a point where it's as intuitive. It's as like you can't tell the difference between it and a human staff member, for example. And I mean, does that sort of resonate with you in some ways?
Yeah, I'm as skeptical about aspects of AI as I'm a devotee and wildly excited about it. And I think there are aspects of it that have been overhyped for sure. And there is certainly things to be very cautious about. Every technology has its train wrecks or shipwrecks, and choose a metaphor. But the thing that I discover on a daily basis is that, and I am keeping my mind completely open to this, is that there's always something radically new and just utterly fascinating. I think there are, we're on a show right now where you're mixing sound, and you no doubt have the ability to do this in fascinating ways for perhaps music or music production. I can see your guitar in the background there. And so I'm going to take a little detour for a sec. So one of my favorite people to listen to on the internet is a guy named Rick Beato. He's a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
He's marvelous, right? Wonderful guy. And he makes a lot of commentary on AI. And he's got a very interesting thing that he talks about, which has stuck out in my mind. To cut a long story short, nobody's interested in AI and music really in and of itself. What they're interested in is U2 or Green Day right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Bruce Springsteen, because what lights us up inside is some resonance with their struggle or their motivation or their vision, right? And you can make that up. You can make up some sort of band or something, but it's always going to be a little bit hollow, right? And you know, there's no fans for AI music, and you could probably create, you know, one every billion songs is going to be something you think, wow, that's really listenable, that's really great. But as soon as you start digging into it, like we would have done when we were kids, opening up the vinyl cover, or, you know, going to the liner notes, it's empty, right? It's devoid of a soul.
I so agree with you. And the way I see it going is pop culture in some ways. In other words, it's a story. That's all you're telling is a story. And you're making up that story that has a character who's a musician, you know, in some universe, and they made music that did this. You can believe that story. As much as I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, it still doesn't sort of stop me from doing martial arts in real life. You know, there has to be something that connects us in an actual way. And I think AI music is just that narrative, that story. That's all it is. And I wonder how that's going to go down for future generations, whether that will be a thing that somebody's into. It's like, oh, I love the story of an AI band. Or will it be that people will pick up guitars again and actually make music and go in that way?
The android's dream of electric sheep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You tune to Risky Business here on Radio Today, 1485 AM. I'm your host, Bryan Hattingh. With me in the studio, John O'Shaw, my co-host, and with us, our guest, Patrick Kayton, co-founder and CEO of Cognician, Inc. And Patrick, you got a story about Jimi Hendrix, haven't you?
Well, I've got lots of stories about Jimi Hendrix. And listening to them later tonight, but you know, there's I was again listening to Rick Beato recently, and he was interviewing Eddie Kramer, who did a lot of recording for Jimmy. And one of the things I love about Rick, right, is that he brings on these people that not a lot of other people have interviewed, and then he asks them questions that they're not going to get from anywhere else. But he also lets them speak, right? Instead of you know, trying to be the voice of the show, he sits back and he lets the people take over, because they're the ones with the stories. And
he's genuinely interested. He's genuinely interested, and he's a muso through and through, and that's sort of in his story, you know.
100%, right? And so interviewing Eddie Kramer, and before he even starts, Eddie says to him, "I got a wonderful story about this, right?" And it was some allusion to Little Wing, so that's how he starts talking about Little Wing. He says that on the day of recording there was an amazing thing that happened, and what happened was while they were, he was kind of, I think, tweaking the mic setup or something like that. And so there was a little bit of time to kill. And in the studio where they were at, there were a whole lot of instruments pressed up against the wall. And one of them was a glockenspiel. And Jimmy went up and started playing with the glockenspiel. And he said, I love this kind of sound, man. This is so cool. And, you know, because everything else is completely electric. And he said, can you just help me work out, you know, what's going on over here with the sort of counterpoint to the music? And he figured out all of the little glockenspiel parts. And so it was a decision made, you know, that one of the most beautiful and wistful things about that gorgeous song is that lovely little glockenspiel note hitting the chord changes.
Yeah.
And it was worked out like 30 minutes before they recorded the song.
Isn't that profound? I mean, that is...
That's it right there.
That's so profound. I mean, it's and so beautiful. And without a shadow of a doubt, Little Wing has got to be the most covered Jimi Hendrix song.
Yeah, it's my favorite Jimi Hendrix song by quite a way. Yeah,
every studio needs a glockenspiel.
Yeah, for serendipity. For serendipity strike here. Yeah,
and every glockenspiel needs a studio.
But it's amazing how artists will just randomly pick it up and start ding, 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 ding. It leads to conversation. It leads to, wow, I love this sound. And wouldn't it be nice to have something similar? And you know, it's sort of like an idea starter. It's one of those things. Your stress ball for the studio.
It even featured on Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells.
Yeah.
That was such a beautiful album that was. Goodness me. But getting back to the heart and soul of this discussion, talk to me about, or talk to the listeners more importantly, around the emergence of Gen AI fluency and workplace adoption. solutions that you've put together?
Sure. So the first time we did this was with ourselves. Shortly after ChatGPT came out, we were using it. Pockets of people within our business were using it and doing amazing things. And we thought, well, let's drink some of our own champagne here and let's create an activation program that gets everybody in the business to use it, because the picture inside Cognition was exactly the same as we see everywhere. 20% of 80% of the users came from 20% of the people. There were people that had literally never touched it at all. And then there were others who were making their own agents and doing incredible things. And so we ran a program that got everybody using ChatGPT in their own unique way. And it was really cool. It could demystify everything. As we find when we enable people to make contributions, great ideas came from all over the organization, which was cool. The first Microsoft Copilot adoption program we did was in the middle of 2024. We worked with a company that had rolled out about 20,000 licenses, and the same thing happened there, right? Most of the usage came from a small group of people. We worked in our program with just over 4,000 people, and in a 16-day period managed to achieve a 475% lift in Copilot adoption, which obviously the client was thrilled with. And that led to a partnership with Microsoft, which has been incredible since February last year to the present day. We are a Microsoft solutions partner. We're an official learning partner. And we've learned all sorts of things about how collaboration with Microsoft can be a very powerful thing, right? But it's also given us entree into many new clients. And again, every time you go in, the picture looks the same. Most of the usage comes from small groups of people. There are parts of the organization that are really far ahead of the others, doing incredible use cases. And also what's happened over time is that many people are using ChatGPT or Claude or something at home in their personal capacity, but haven't necessarily started using AI at work. And there's many reasons for that. One of them is that they're scared about what they're going to put in accidentally, client data or user data or anything like that. And so they're unsure and uncertain about what to do next. And then this is probably the biggest issue. There is a natural gravitational pull back to working in the same way that everybody's been working in for decades. And this is the hardest problem to solve for, right? And it's the same, if you think about it, Brian, it's the same for anything, right? Great leadership. A changing situation in an organization demands new things of leaders, that they change the way that they think, they change the way that they act, they change the way they galvanize people. But they don't do it, right? Because there's a gravitational pull back to the safe, the known, the familiar, the way things have always been done. And you could come up with hundreds of different analogies here. It goes back to what we were saying in the beginning of the call. The status quo is safe. The status quo is not threatening, or at least comparatively not threatening. Very few people are the activators of the world who are willing to take a risk, step out into the unknown, try something new, and put their heads on the line. Now, think about how many times you and I have gone into a room before and you're looking around for that activator, right? Yeah. Who's that one person that's going to give it a shot? And behind every single deal we've ever done, there's been an activator. There's been somebody who's gone, I've got a round hole, this is a square peg, but I'm going to find a way to make it fit. And I'm going to give the activation energy that is required to make this reaction take hold and work. And, that's what's required to get started, is that vision, that willingness. And it's the same thing for working with a company like ours as for changing the way you work as well. So what we do is we provide some of that activation energy and we've got a whole process for that. But I can see I'm sure you've got thoughts in your mind. You want to share something on the basis of that.
So it's so interesting what you're saying, because I think what you're coming up against is this funny thing called success. Fortune magazine, no, it wasn't Fortune, it was Forbes magazine, some time back, said that the companies and people most likely to fail are those that are successful. And the thoughts behind it were that when you're being successful, you then often don't check things out, because why would you do that? I mean, Kodak was a prime example of that, And so, there's this thing of almost an unconscious, I'm doing okay, I've done okay, I'm getting by. Why would I need to go to the effort of changing how I see things and changing what I do when it's so much easier just to do what I've always done. And it's always worked. And I've, this is the way we do things around here type of thing, and that can be fatal because depending on the level of situation that occurs or inflection point that arises. But it's that thing of, guys, you know what? There's a better world, and legacy, no matter how magnificent, is limiting when it prescribes future. Don't let legacy get in the way, because the sum total of all we know and all that we can do is so small compared to what we don't know that we don't know, and the hidden potential that lies within each one of us and us collectively in organizations.
Totally. And we don't build our ships so that we can keep them in port, right? Kodak discovered that the hard way, and there are many other stories like that. We need to keep on innovating. We need to keep on asking ourselves the question, is this the best that we can do for our clients, for our collaborators, for our people? We have to constantly challenge ourselves.
I'd like to bring up the example, make the steady rise from when fire was first invented, how many people decided not to use it because they were going to get burnt. And so if it carries on from there, and it makes me think about, how many libraries are still around and how many people still go to them to seek information. Am I silly to think that that's still a thing? Is that still around? And then, of course, it's about, does every organization have that entrepreneur and that entrepreneurial personality that will go in and say, well, this is actually really easy if you think of it this way, and perhaps frames it differently, and that sort of champion. And I don't think that that's a common trait. I mean, every leader of an organization has hopefully got an entrepreneurial mindset in that way to learn those new tools. And certainly I felt that that pull to sort of go, okay, what can I do with AI? It can start doing basic images for me. I found it a really great summary tool. It's an idea generator. So there's certain things that I've sort of found that's really cool with it. I can't wait to be able to link up all of my logins and get it inside I know the security and stuff is still a major thing to worry about, but eventually I should be able to tell it to go do my accounting for me. That'll be great.
Definitely. There's anything that is kind of deterministic. There's nothing it can't help out with, for sure. And just coming back to some of these use cases, there's the question that often gets asked of us is, how do you calculate whether there's any kind of return on investment for this? And there are different clients of ours who are doing that in different ways. We've got a major banking client that has a simple metric, which is a cost per employee hour that they look at for various things across the business. So they would look at a process and they'd say the cost per based on employee hours for this is like 100 employee hours for this process. Now let's create a hypothesis about how AI could make this less time intensive. And so we'll say that if the employee hours have gone from 100 to 20, then we know we've saved a certain amount of employee hours, and there's a cost associated with that. Now, what I like about that is that we are talking about changing ways of working as a whole, right? So we are talking about measuring something like productivity. It's extremely broad. What should be the appropriate measure? What's good about that is that everything that involves people has a cost associated with it if you look at the employee cost per employee hour basis. And if you change that, then there's a presumed cost. The bank knows it's not perfect, but it's a good proxy, because a lot of other clients are tying themselves up in measurement knots and they're not actually able to show a decent return. Other clients of ours, like we work with a large number of lawyers in a legal function of a large global company. They got to the end of an activation program with us, and we were asking them about return on investment. And they said, well, we noticed that our outsourcing costs for overflow work went down. Now, the reason they only noticed this at the end was that nobody was complaining about doing more work. Their throughput had just gone up. And when their throughput went up, there was less of a need to outsource overflow work. So there are lots of interesting things we're learning about how to calculate a return on investment. But I think the models have become clearer, more evolved, and more useful over time. The clever thing to do right now is to experiment and to figure out how to do that, how to do interesting things with AI. And the best way to experiment is to figure out how people can make contributions with it.
So, Pat, what comes to mind as sitting talking is something you mentioned to me around the qualitative feedback that many companies have given about the savings from AI, in that people were able to direct more time in engaging with each other and engaging with people in different capacities, which must have such a significant value attached to that companies should be mindful of.
Totally. So, Bryan, I don't think we've actually mentioned the kind of data on this call, but I've spoken to you about it before, which is that we often ask people how they're allocating their time if time has been saved. Because I mean that's the usual focus on investment, is that people are saving time. So what are they reallocating their time to? And so we ask this question in all of our programs. And what's really quite fascinating is that the vast majority of people talk about allocating it to time spent with other people. So lawyers, for example, will talk about spending more time advising clients. Salespeople will spend more time with the client themselves, trying to understand their problems. People in internal environments will talk about spending more time with their colleagues. And it's really quite uncanny about how the time gets reallocated. People are talking about, paradoxically, when AI, the threatening kind of framing of AI is that it's making us less human. What do people do when they use it? They spend more time with other humans.
That's wonderful. On that note, you tune to Risky Business. I'm your host, Bryan Hattingh. With me in the studio, Patrick Kayton, CEO and co-founder of Cognician. And that's spelled Cognician, just in case you were looking for it. And if any of you are keen to find out more about this, easy way would be actually just to reach out to hello@cycan.coza, and we will certainly introduce you and assist you with more information about this amazing business and its offerings in the whole world of digital-based behavioral change and AI adoption. And Patrick, so what's next, and what do you see coming in the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months?
So the thing that's in front of me right now is a huge opportunity to go to as many businesses as possible around the world and help them take advantage of this technology. What's also quite interesting in parallel, and I know you met my friend and colleague Kojo recently, Kojo Benko. He's got an interesting point of view. He is a solutions engineer at Microsoft, and he's about to go into a role globally where he'll be more influential about sweeping global change with regard to Copilot's adoption. His point of view is, if you're inside an organization right now, you're likely going to get some really great AI training or opportunities to use tools. But what happens, if you're working at a McDonald's and you're working in the restaurant, are you going to get the same kind of thing? I mean, McDonald's is a big behemoth, but maybe not a great example. But there are people who are working not as knowledge workers or information workers in giant companies. Is this going to create some sort of AI divide? And so that's something we want to get involved in as well. Taking the tools and the approaches that we've got and liberating them to the biggest possible audience. So that's it, Bryan, is that it's a scale, it's a moment for scale for AI adoption. And we believe we're the best organization in the world to do it. So we want to get as many opportunities to do it as possible.
And it's fabulous that you've got partners the likes of Microsoft and Accenture assisting you. And on top of which, Microsoft has got its whole ESIF offering that makes it terribly compelling for companies to consider it.
Yeah, totally. So what that means is that if you are a large organization buying Copilot licenses, you're very likely going to be offered in customer investment funds. And when I say very large organization, there are thresholds for this, obviously. And those are not the only funding options available, right? Microsoft has a range of different funding options available, also which Cognition is eligible for, that can be offered to clients. And it makes it quite compelling to run activation programs off the back of this funding, because what you will surely see is that if you do nothing, you're not guaranteeing that anybody's going to pick up these tools and use them. No matter how easy they are to use, they are a significant change in the way of working. So, if you put a desktop computer on somebody's desk in the 1980s, what are the chances that they were going to insert the correct disks fire up GW Basic or whatever other kind of system software they're using at the time, and then start deriving some sort of value, right? It's very slim. And even though AI tools are really accessible and easy to use, you have to go through a deliberate process to try them out in different ways before you have enough instances and use cases in your mind for the penny to drop to go, I understand how this is useful now in improving my craft, in accelerating my ability to do good work, enabling my contributions to my organization. You can be shown that nothing much will change, right? But if you're involved in it, if you're involved in the process, the chances of you changing and figuring out super innovative ways of using these tools are much better. We often talk about, we borrow liberally from McKinsey's 3 horizons, and we talk about the first horizon being basic fluency, right? Are you picking up these tools and using them and figuring out productive ways of doing that in your work? In the second horizon, because you cannot unsee what you've seen in the first, you start to notice interesting ways to be able to use these tools in your function, maybe for better collaboration with others. Maybe you start to see agentic use cases. And only then, once you've started to make those functional changes and become more au fait with how workflows can be changed, do you have a chance of entering the third horizon, the frontier firm horizon, where you can introduce agents to completely change your workflows across your functions and improve your business and achieve the promised kind of return on investment that goes beyond the basic fluency. But all organizations have to learn to crawl before they can work. They all have to go through these phases. That if you try and leapfrog any of the phases, you end up with a workforce that's uninitiated, unaware, uninvolved, and that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. So it's actually creating a capacity to learn the new way of work.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I can't believe it that they've just very timelessly come to the end of the show. And it's been such a delight and pleasure having you online and chatting to you again. And it's wonderful to hear of the growth and success within Cognition. So any parting shots to the listeners out there? Words
Thank
of
you,
wisdom?
Bryan. I'm going to make a music recommendation, if I may. So for those Red Hot Chili Pepper fans out there, if you haven't heard Flea's new album, that's a wonderful listen. So he collaborates with jazz musicians, and there's a beautiful song which has been covered many, many times called Wichita Lineman. And he collaborates with Nick Cave, who sings it. And it's just absolutely haunting and beautiful and incredible. And he plays, Flea plays the horn on it as well, which sounds magical, right? So give that a listen.
Thank you for that.
We'll have to include it on the next show.
Absolutely. I think we will. And just wishing you and your family continued health, happiness, success, and Cognition going from strength to strength. Listeners, if you remember, if you want to find out more, just drop an email to hello@Psycan, and we'll very happily chat to you and connect you with Cognition and let you know more of what they can do to help you. And wishing you all the best, and reminding you, listeners, that if you're not with the ones you love the ones you're with, and take time to show and love them how much you do. Well.
B, you haven't messed that one up. So first time for everything, right?
It's the first time for everything. I've got to get AI. It's got to help me. All the best, Pat. All the best, John.
Cheers, Bryan. Cheers, John.
Have a great week,
guys.
Cheers,
man. All the best. Cheers, man.